Thanks. So today I'm going to talk about quality control. So it can be a little bit dry as a topic. It's very, very basic. It's something it's really the basics that every buyer should expect from China. So why is it very important? I'm going to take just a couple of very simple examples. There was a really nice cooler, a product, they call it the coolest cooler on Kickstarter. So they made a really nice prototype. I'm sure they spent a lot of time on the design and engineering, and then they got a lot of backers, a lot of money from people who wanted to buy it from them. And then once they got the money, then they thought, okay, how are we going to make it in China? And obviously, that's where things got really messed up. So they explain, producing this many pieces at that level of quality takes a lot of time, etc., etc. Basically, they did not forecast that there would be so many steps in the way. And then this is one of the backers who said, hey, I'm getting really impatient. I'm going to do a video on Facebook and YouTube, and I'm going to say you guys are a scammer. You guys are like 12 months late, and so on. So quality issues, issues to get the production running at the right quality rate is nearly killing them. So if it hurts on Kickstarter, it kills you right away on Amazon. This is the kind of email you never, ever, ever want to receive if you are an FBA seller. Oh, there's more than 1% complaint. We kick you out. Bye-bye. That's over. So the very, very first thing you need to understand is that it's the buyer's responsibility. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to work with the right supplier, and then everything will just go, it's going to be easy. A lot of the people here are good, but you still need to ensure that they take the right steps. And I think Mike really explained some of the shortcomings you can expect. So really, it's on your shoulders. You have to take the right steps. And really, one thing I want to emphasize today is that everything you do has an impact on quality, and I'm going to go right into that. So here is mobile electronic products and some other hardware products. So I'm going to take an example of a electromechanical product customized, meaning that you designed it partly or fully. And then, okay, let's go through everything you should do to get things right. Partner selection, obviously you need to select the right people here based on their capabilities, based on their experience, based on a lot of different things. This is a very, very important step, obviously, to get good quality products. If you work with the wrong product, with the wrong people, you will always get bad products, 99 times out of 100 at least. Then you need to define the specification sheet. Now, if you don't tell them what you expect, what you want, and we'll show some examples down in a few slides. But if you don't tell them what you want, if you don't tell them what your quality standard is, what the functionalities of your product should be, how do you expect them to guess? They serve how many different buyers in different countries on different market levels, different distribution channels. You need to be very specific about what you need. That obviously is the very, very basis to have quality products. So once you have done that, you can go into the partner selection stage. You need to walk along, get on the internet, and through different ways, identify some potential suppliers. Request a quotation, as Mike said, maybe not the exact design that you're gonna ask them to make finally, but something to get the ball rolling, to get an idea about pricing. This is extremely dangerous for first-time buyers because they tend to be attracted by the lowest prices. Usually, if there's kind of the market level is kind of in that band, and you have one supplier that's 20% cheaper, you're going to have issues with this supplier. Again, 99% of the time. You need to do some due diligence. You need to run some background checks on them. Who are they? Is what they say really true? You need to audit the factory, send an auditor. If you can do it, there are a lot of companies like mine that do it. It's pretty easy to find people to do that. So do they have a quality system in place? Do they have the processes they really say they have? and are they already making the kind of product that they say they're making? Are they organized, and so on? Okay, so let's say you did all of this, factory audits and due diligence show, well, this looks like a good partner to manufacture our product. Okay, great. Well, as I said, this is an example about a customized product that is going to be made for you, not something you pick on a shelf here. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of non-recurring engineering, a lot of engineering work that you do at the beginning. That's what people usually call development. Okay, it usually happened once, and then if you do it right, maybe you do a next version of your product, you start again. Okay, so I inserted a few on-site visits because you can't just do everything through Skype and phone calls and so on. You need to be in China. If there's a supplier that's really key to your business, you should come, I say at least 3-4 times a year, at least, okay? To gauge also their interest. It's not just about capabilities and experience and what they put in place. It's really to make sure that they see you're involved and to make sure they are still involved, okay? That they have their best engineers on the project and so on. An agreement about the engineering, obviously, before you start to work on the tooling, on maybe it's Mylar film, if it's PCBA, you know, different kinds of engineering work. Before you work on that, you want to talk to a lawyer, put the right framework in place, okay? Then prototyping, signing off on first samples. What I call Npi Management is you're going to go through, and they're going to go through a new product introduction process. And as Mike said, you can't really assume that all of the suppliers in China have a proper project management system in place, and when it comes to working on new products, a good NPI process in place. This, again, most of the time is not the case from my experience. So you need to, again, take things in your hand. Just one example, and there's a lot of things in there. I'm not going to go in depth, but just an example is you're going to have different versions of the drawings and of the product specifications. Well, you need a little bit of document control. It's very, very basic, but make sure that everybody, all the parties have access to one repository where there's the latest version. It's so basic, and yet there's so many issues that come just from that problem. And it's not just for office people. It's also for people on the factory floor. Oh yeah, there's this nice cutting machine, great, but they loaded the wrong program that they used for the previous prototyping. And now, oh crap, we have to go back to square one. Very important, very often overlooked. Agreement, OEM or ODM, depending on your situation. Again, you need to work with the lawyer. Before you send any money, you need to make sure that you have a framework that covers all the main points and all the main risks. Okay, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not going to talk about that. But what I'm going to say is this has a strong impact on quality. If you don't say exactly what you expect through the business relationship, then you might have some issues. Just an example, let's say during production they have some issues, you find about the issues, and then they say, well, no, just you accept it, or we just put it on Taobao anyway, we can sell it. If you don't have any contract in place, you're stuck. I guess Charles talked a little bit about that. Again, talk to a lawyer. So let's say all this engineering is done, you did a great job, okay. Confirm the costing. Again, they invest, they do they prepare the tooling or whatever it is. You check, you do a first article inspection, maybe on the casing. Maybe you have some kind of product with a plastic casing around. Well, they make the tooling. Okay, great. You're going to want to check if it's really, if it really looks good. At least the first samples they make look good. Definitely before they go into mass production. So you have some checkpoints along the way, okay, along the process. Okay, I'm going to go on that. So let's say You paid for the tooling, they made the tooling great. You still have some work before they can go into production. And that's what a lot of people actually skip. And they say, okay, let's go direct into mass production. Because most Chinese suppliers will not tell you, wait, we still have a few things to do. They will say, oh, great, okay, send them money, we'll buy the components, we go ahead. But the problem with that attitude is that they kind of wing it, you know? They say, okay, let's go there and then we'll figure out the problems. And they again, 95% of the time they are too optimistic. So you need to tell them, wait, this is our procedure. This is our purchasing procedure. In the pre-production, we still have a few things to get right. Okay? So I inserted again on-site visit. Again, every few months, come and see them, make sure everything's fine. The key people you were talking to are still here, you know. Still the same factory, you know, these kind of things. Obviously issuing the PO, everything's fine. Let's say you send them a 30% deposit or you open a letter of credit. Before they can start, make sure they have some work instructions. And they provided some training to the people who are going to work, you know, the production operators. If they go ahead and like, okay, boom, let's do it, it's nearly the same as usual. You know, what we find is that very often we come in when a production project has already gone wrong and we say, oh, there's some problems, and then the buyer says, well, okay, just tell the supplier and then they're going to fix it. But they still don't know how to fix it. This step was skipped. You need to actually make sure they have some simple explanations, simple instructions for the operators. And let me check the time, it's fine. So they know what they're doing. A lot of quality issues come from this, okay? Good work instructions, highlight, okay, you have to do this, 1, 2, 3, and you always need to make sure about this is a critical item in this production step, okay? Again, revisit your new product introduction, planning, update all the dates, when do you plan to have all the components, when do you plan to launch mass production, and so on. Agree on a way to follow up, as Mike said, for example, every Wednesday, 2 p.m. on Skype, just an example, but it works. And then make sure also they have a control plan, okay? This is a must in certain industries, like if you make car parts, but it's also used in a lot of other industries. And basically what it does is it just decomposes production into several steps, and then for every step, it identifies, okay, which gauges are we going to use? Is it going to be a caliper or whatever? What instrument to check if it's fine? And it's going to be done on what frequency, on how many pieces, and so on. And what's the expected value and what's the tolerance? So the factory people actually know what they should do, okay? Again, this is something everybody tends to skip in certain industries. In the electronic industry, a lot of people skip it. But basically, you are trusting the factory to do all that work, but if you don't even check that they do it, most of the time they're not going to do it. Again, they're going to wing it, and that's where a lot of quality problems come from. They don't even know what to check, when, and so on. Okay? Test plan, I guess Martin after me is going to talk a little bit more about that, but you need to know it's not just about quality, it's also about safety compliance, okay? There are probably some regulations in your country. Anything that's electrical, for example, be very careful. You need to know, and the factory needs to know. Pilot run, also something that's skipped 99 or 98% of the time. But if you have a large order, okay, and you can expect that the factory is going to run it for months and months and years, it really makes a lot of sense to do a pilot run. If you don't do a pilot run, by which I mean running a short production run, even if it's a limited speed, not the speed of mass production, with the same components as production, with the same people as production, with the same machines as production. If you don't do that, there's a lot of issues that will pop up later in mass production, where it's really going to cost a lot to the factory and cost a lot of delays to you, the buyer. Okay? If you place a large order, definitely something you should require. Most manufacturers don't like that because it messes up their efficiency in production. They don't really want to do it, especially if they pay the operators by the piece. But again, if you have a large order, definitely something you have to do. Okay? Now let's say, okay, they're ready in production. They're ready for production. They go for production. Well, you better follow up. Again, you had some kind of planning and different checkpoints to check with them, how is it going. You need to check quality and at the same time production status, obviously. Send somebody in the factory, either someone from your team or someone from an inspection company like ours, and there's a lot of companies like ours. It's very easy to find people to do that, okay? If there are some issues, make sure the factory actually agrees, understands them, set up some kind of correction plan so that they fix the issues, send somebody to check again. All of this should be in your OEM agreement type of framework. What happens in case there are serious issues that are found, okay? Obviously, you have to do that, at the very least, before shipment. If not, the goods are shipped, they're on the boat, you have paid them everything, that's it. They're not going to reimburse you, they're not going to reproduce for free. Again, 99% of the time, okay? Logistics, obviously, you need to make sure this is fine. I see a lot of buyers who buy small lots and then, they say, okay, let's send it by plane or LCL in a container, and they don't really pay attention to the packing. Or is it going to be on a pallet? Is it going to be protected? And then it arrives and half the cartons are crushed. Well, this is a big issue, okay? Let's say the goods are approved, you send them the final payment, they ship. Okay, I put product test and analysis here because some of the time the results will come after shipment. This is something, again, if you plan well in advance, you might be able to get the results before approving shipment, which is obviously much better. If you have products on the sea and then they're not compliant to these regulations, well, it's a big issue, okay? And long term, if you work, again, as I chose the word partner for your supplier, you should select people you can work with over the years, okay? So let's call them partner. Well, let's say they have 10 major customers and 3 of them put pressure on them every time to improve on this, improve on that. And you are one of the 7 others that never push them to do anything. What's going to happen? All of their energy is going to go to these 3 that keep pushing them, okay? So put in place some kind of KPIs, just a few KPIs, we'll talk about it later, just to show them you follow up and you see if they improve or not, okay? Ask them to set up a few corrective actions in their processes, in their facilities. Again, at that stage, you should already have a history. You should know where things went wrong, and you should have an idea about what they should do to get it right the next time, okay? And if they need some training in certain aspects, don't assume that they will learn it from other buyers, okay? Again, it's on your shoulders. If I really try to boil it down, when it comes to quality, let's say there's 4 blocks, okay? Supplier choice, very, very important, and make sure they are the right fit for your company. I'll talk about it a little bit more. And make sure they don't subcontract. Again, this should be in your contract. Very clear communication. What are your specs? What do you expect? Okay, and the materials and the quality standards and what is a defect, what is not a defect, safety compliance. There's a lot of things going to this, but you need to document it. You need to send it to them. Payments after quality is confirmed. Obviously, I see some people here for the first time, and then okay, they ask for 100% prepayment. Let's do it. Of course not, definitely not. You need to have some milestones, just the same as the flow charts I showed before. You need to have some milestones. This is fine, then we send you the 30%. This is fine, then we send you the remainder, etc. Okay? And then meetings in the factory, as I said, you need to go there regularly. You need to send some inspectors. You can't just trust them blindly, at least not at the beginning. And product testing. Maybe have the inspectors pull some samples to send to a lab. If you just accept their PDF documents, there can be a certain level of trust, but again, there's a risk element here. I think Martin can talk about that later. It's more about his expertise, not mine. Okay, so if we go into them one by one, first block, if you work with the supplier and the first order is messed up, don't think that the second order will get better, okay? this is something that we Western people think, yeah, okay, the first time was not so good, but it seems like they understand what went wrong. Next time they will do it right. From experience in China, if they get it wrong the first time, they might get it even more wrong the second time, okay? And this is 90% of the time. And be aware that if you work with one supplier to customize, to develop a custom product, well, you can't really switch easily later to another supplier. There are obvious switching costs. If it took you 9 months to get all the engineering and pre-production work right the first time, well, it might also take you 9 months the second time. So gets back to square one, work with the right partner, extremely important. Business fit. You need to be attractive to them, they need to be attractive to you. And that has a lot to do with the size of the company actually and the size of your orders, okay? I'll talk about this in the next slides. So you need to look at their experience, if they've always been selling on the Chinese domestic market or in some other developing countries, well, they might not be a good fit if you plan to sell on the US market, for example, okay? And subcontracting. It's like a national sport here. Nobody here thinks it's wrong, okay? So you need to make it very, very clear that it's wrong for you, and you need them to sign some documents about that, okay? When I say work with a supplier that's a good fit for you, if I really try to simplify it, there's 3 levels of suppliers, okay? Level 1 is just a small workshop. Maybe they set up their shops 3 years ago. They're kind of doing some assembly. They subcontract a lot of the work. They have maybe 40, 50, 100 workers. Very low price, very attractive, very aggressive. You know, yeah, we'll do it. But you need to be constantly on their back, always checking what happens. It's better if you work through a trading company or with some kind of sourcing agent. If you work with them, dangerous, okay? Level 2, well, they grew up. They're maybe, I don't know, 400 people. A little bit more structured. Price is a little bit higher. They're a little bit more conservative on what they promise you. You know, that might be a good fit if you place orders, I don't know, $50,000 orders, $100,000 orders. They will be interested, okay? And now let's say you see a supplier here, and great, they have this big manufacturing facility, they have 2,000 people, okay, and you're going to give them POs of $20,000 or $50,000, you know, twice a year maybe. It's peanuts for them, it's nothing. So they're going to charge much higher prices, and they're going to be much more rigid, like, oh no, we don't do that, sorry. And they will be very focused on their big customers, and you will not be one of them, okay? Why am I saying all this? Because when it comes to quality, well, level 1, high danger. You need to check, be very careful. Level 2, if it corresponds to your the size of your orders, and let's say you represent at least 8-10% of their annual capacity, well, they will pay some attention to you, okay? That becomes nice. Level 3, yeah, they have systems in place. Most of the time, if they do it in-house, it will come out nicely. But since they don't really care about you, number 1, they might subcontract. Extremely common. Oh, small order, you know, we don't care. Let's not do it here. We have a high cost structure. Let's do it outside. We don't really care, whatever, okay? And oh, yeah, we promised that kind of components. No, it's not going to get 64 gig. It's going to get 16 gig. If they're not happy, whatever. We don't really mind. They send us the deposit anyway. They are hooked, okay? You need to be careful. So if you place very small POs, you might work with this kind of people, because everybody else might not be interested in your business, okay? And by the way, if you work with some trading companies and you give them some small POs, chances are it will end up in this kind of workshop, just because they also can't get your small order in a very nice and big factory, okay? Now, that's a little bit bigger, okay, you see more people. Maybe they might also do some fabrication, machining and so on, not just final assembly and packing. A few more systems in place. They might do some incoming QC on the components. They might do some outgoing QC to check, you know. When you get to this kind of manufacturer, it's much more structured. Okay, internal logistics are still a mess. The containers are no good, but they have some work instructions. They have good lighting. They have some okay workstations, a conveyor belt. Okay, that looks better. That looks like, you know, most of the time the product will come out nice out of there. It's very, very simple, very simplistic. Again, sorry for that, but I talked about KPIs. When it comes to quality, there's a lot of things you can follow up. You can slice it that any way you want, but basically, you can follow up the proportion of the orders that you accept and that are okay when you receive them, because you might also want to check them after they're delivered in your country. There's a lot of other things, maybe the result on the AQL inspections and so on. Same thing with delays, you know. On-time delivery, you can do the same thing. Cost, you can do the same thing. General service, attitude, you can do the same thing. There's a few KPIs like this you can follow up on, and then you can see the trend. And you can send them the trend, maybe on a quarterly basis or semi-annual basis, and show them, hey, you guys are not doing great, right? When you gather some data, it's also, and if you do some inspections, it's also pretty helpful to help them improve. So let's say this is a final inspection on one of your orders, and you want them to have fewer defects. Well, don't just tell them, hey, it needs to be better. No, you need to look at the highest sources, the main sources of defects. You need to tell them, well, why do you have so many rusted products and so many plating issues? Well, plating, do you subcontract it? Maybe the plating workshop is no good. Maybe you need to change to another one that controls what they're doing. Oh, another one with better process control. Oh, it's 10 cents extra. Well, maybe it's fine, you know. Rust, how come? You know, again, might be the materials, might be the control of humidity in the final warehouse. I don't know. Might be a lot of things, but at least you can push them to dig into where the problems come from. And that's how over time you push them to become better. You're helping them, by the way. The systems they will put in place to solve these issues will also be good for their other customers. But this is definitely something you should try to do over time. Okay, second block is fine. The requirements, okay. A lot of people come here and they think, well, I have a sample, a golden sample, a perfect sample. I approved it. It's got all the functionalities I want. It's got the finish I want. It's got, you know, the color, everything is right. Great, it's enough. They know, I sign on it, I have one in my office, it's fine, I did my job. No, no, no. There's a lot of things that can go wrong if you do that. First, the samples you see here, they're here for selling, okay? In the average Chinese manufacturer's mind, it's not linked to what they promised, okay? It's just what they used to sell. You need to make it very clear through your documentation that, okay, this is exactly what we want. You need to put it on paper. You need to, and I'm going to show a few examples after that. Also, the sample is great, but where's the labeling? Where's the packing? You know? And what about if there's a little scratch here or a little scratch at the bottom? What do you count as a defect? What's acceptable? It doesn't say all these things. That's why it's really not enough. So the best is to have some documentation, get it translated in Chinese, send somebody to the factory to explain it to the people, get them to actually say okay, to sign it, to chop it, and it should be referenced in your contract. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but this is very important. An example of follow-up of the production status. You can have different milestones, but basically they purchase the components, they receive the components, they start mass production, and maybe there's some fabrication first, and then goes into assembly, goes into packing, is ready for inspection, is ready for final shipment, and you need to show them, hey, you told me it would be whatever, October 6th. Actually, it's October 9, and the next one, oh, October 17. Hey, we're getting behind. Oh, and this one was October 24. You're now 10 days later, 10 days late. So you put a little bit of pressure on them. Again, some customers do it, some customers don't. Guess which ones get their attention, right? You have to document it and follow up very closely. I talked about specifications and putting it in a documented form. Can take many forms. Basically, you need to, if you want them to pay attention to it, you need to inspect their products. And if it's not good, you will refuse. Now they pay attention. So you need to present it like checkpoints, not really specs or product sheet or whatever. Put it as checkpoints and say this is the checklist that the inspector is going to follow. Oh, people are going to pay attention. And then basically some requirements, when you can have some tolerances. It can be, the color. Yeah, you can say refer to the golden sample. You can say diameter, etc., etc. It can be the size, the weight, can be the functionality. If I press on this should happen, etc., etc. Something a lot of people forget is defects, potential defects. Now you can think of all the defects that might appear on your product, but some of them are pretty obvious. So you need to think through, what might happen. And then when you receive some pre-production samples or even some production samples, you might find some of the defects and add them to this list. Okay, and then for the next order, well, when you receive, you have a bunch of defects, then you add them here, and you make it very clear what is critical, what is major, what is minor. Okay, all of the Chinese exporters and manufacturers that work for export customers know about critical defects, major defects, minor defects. They know what an inspection is. So they will pay attention to this. And by the way, this will make things much easier when your inspector actually finds some issues. Then all of a sudden, there's way fewer discussions. But if you don't do it first, then you might go into a long discussion where they might say, well, this is just a minor defect, it's nothing. And you might say, no. If my customers see that, they send it back to the store, and then it's like a disaster. And then they're going to take photos of it, put it on Facebook, and So document this so that everybody knows what's expected. Regular quality inspections, as I said, once it's shipped out, once you receive it in your warehouse or your customer's warehouse, it's too late. If you find some issues, you might have to throw everything to the dump. You're going to lose a lot of money, okay? And your supplier will not reproduce for free. And they will not send you the money back. This just doesn't happen. Most of the time they say, oh, we'll give you a 10% discount or 20% discount on the next order. Actually, this is very dangerous. Makes things worse for the next order, because then they make zero profit, and then they're going to do an even worse job at it, okay? Don't go into that vicious cycle. Is just recipe for disaster. Again, set some milestones, check. Lab testing. Think of lab testing at the same time as the quality inspections. Again, your inspectors might pick some samples, send them to a lab for testing. And to get the most out of inspections, what should you do? Keep an extra sample. Make sure the inspector can use that sample. Maybe send it to the inspector or the inspection company. Write a mention on the PO about the inspection. Write a mention on the OEM agreement, the legal contract about the inspection. And of course, tell the supplier and make sure it's written also that they should keep a couple of days in their schedule for the inspection. If not, they will say, oh, yeah, X-factory date is Thursday night. Tell the inspector to come on Thursday 4 p.m. And he's going to have like 2 hours to do the job. Very, very bad situation. Never get into that game. Make sure it's written. Make sure they know about it in advance. And then when they say, oh, can we skip the inspection to be on time? You need to say, no, this is your problem. And maybe you have some penalties for late shipment and so on. You need to put a responsibility on them to make sure they don't bump your order. Oh, there's another customer that pushes. Maybe this one doesn't push so much. It's fine. We're going to do it later. That's what you don't want to happen to your order. When to check during production? Well, there's different milestones during production. Most of the time you don't need to do all of that. The very least you need to do is all the way to the right. Basically just before shipment, count all the quantity, make sure it's nearly all packed or all packed. Check the packing, the labeling, the product. Take some random sampling to really have an idea about average quality. Okay, that's if you do only one, do only this one. The rest really depends on your type of production. I'm not going to go into this now, but depends on Depends on the risk you identify based on the production setup. You want to check on your suppliers. You also want to check on your inspectors. Let's say you grow up and you have a team of inspectors that go around your factories and check the products. Well, you also want a few statistics about what they do. And one of the interesting statistics is the proportion of defects that they find. Critical defect, major defect, minor defect. And you will see some of them will be more lenient and some of them tighter. Well, that's interesting. Another one that we track with our IT tool is when you do an AQL inspection, there's like a limit. And if you're just above the limit, it's failed. If you're just below, it's passed. How many of the inspections are just below the limit? Like just at the limit or like 10% below the limit? Well, that's suspect. Once in a while, yeah, definitely will happen. But if it's half the inspections, there's something suspect going on. There's a lot of things to track, but these are a few interesting ones. Again, and I'm really emphasizing this, repeating it many times, you have your roadmap, you have your milestones, and don't skip any milestone. Don't do them in the wrong order. Again, I go back to the example. Somebody who sends the payment, and then later they find there's some quality issues where they have zero leverage. Supplier doesn't care. You have to assume that the supplier is only looking at his short-term interest. What am I going to have in the bank at the end of the week or at the end of the month? You have to assume they're not thinking further away from that. It's the sad reality. Some of them do, but you have to assume that they don't, because you don't know until you've been in business with them for a while. Okay? So keep some leverage in your hands, and don't think that they will play the long term. Don't expect it right away. Letters of credit can be a good tool. Now, obviously, banks charge for that. There's a few $100s at least in bank fees, but it means that you don't have to send a 30% deposit. So if it's a first-time order with a new factory, you're not really sure it's going to turn out right, you still have the option to cancel the order if they do things right, if they mess it up. Now, of course, this is contingent on the fact that they agree to get paid with a letter of credit. I have a couple of minutes left. Bank wire, much lower bank fees. Make sure that you send, let's say it's 30% that you agree on before production, make sure you send it after, obviously all the tooling is done, and then also after you have a perfect prototype in hand. If they send you something and they say, well, this is wrong, but we'll get it right in mass production, high risk, okay? Might be right, but you really need to understand the technical reasons behind it, and you need to follow up very carefully. And the balance, try to negotiate after shipment if possible. If not, if they want to be paid fully for the order before they ship, get a quality inspection report that's passed, accept it, and then send the money, and then they can ship. But don't do it the other way around, okay? And this is my last slide. When you work with the same supplier over the years, and you want them to improve in terms of quality performance, on-time delivery, and so on, you need to think in terms of supplier development, okay? So the very basic is to select the right suppliers. Okay, I already talked about that. And if you work on custom products, you need to help them during the engineering and pre-production phases. Just an example, if they do the tooling wrong, well, they might not have the competency to see why the tooling is wrong, because probably they outsource some or all of that job, okay? And they're not experts in making a mold, for example, okay? And you see there's some issues, but they say, oh, it's fine, in production it's going to be fine. Well, we've seen a lot of examples where they have a first pass yield of maybe 50% or 70%, meaning that there's a lot of defects that need to be reworked, okay, or even scrapped. Now, guess what happens when in that situation? They're going to bump up the price. They're going to try to think, well, what's wrong? But maybe they don't have the competency. Well, that's where you should find some kind of consultants or engineers to go and help them with the right competencies. Because if you don't help them, they're going to say, well, there's 20% scrap, so we're going to bump the price up. You know, we don't really care as long as they pay, right? Obviously, you don't want that. Now, when you have some existing suppliers, current suppliers, quality standard, okay, that's the very basic. If they can't meet your quality standard, game's off. You need to switch. There's no way around that, right? If that's done, okay, try to pick the low-hanging fruit. Again, have a look at production. What are they doing? Why is it taking so long? Maybe some of their suppliers, their subcontractors, the plating, the anodizing, whatever it is doing something wrong. Maybe they should switch their sub-suppliers and so on. You need to rethink maybe your packing. Maybe you can save some space. Maybe you can avoid some of the damages. There's a lot of things here that you can think of and re-engineer as you go. And then if you place significant orders and really the supplier works maybe 40%, 50, 60% of their capacity is for you, you can really go in with high-level engineers and say, hey, we need to reorganize production. Let us dedicate this part of your workshop to us and implement a better layout, better processes, okay? So I hope I gave you an overview of basically everything that impacts quality and what you can do about it. And if you have a few questions, please go ahead.
Fantastic, Renaud. Anyone has questions for Renaud about quality control? Like, our audience is quiet today. Okay, here, Charles.
Hey.
I just wanted to add something to your seminar where we just met, both Mike and Neil and myself, a buyer from the United States that has a situation that's come up with Underwriters Laboratories in UL, where if you walk around, you know, everyone has the line cord that has the little UL sticker on there, or you have an AC adapter that you're buying for, or it's part of a kit that you're buying, an LCD or whatever. These people were shut down because they advertised their product as UL, got a cease and desist letter from Underwriters Laboratories, and the manufacturer in China said, oh yeah, well, we use UL parts and whatever, but they didn't have UL for whatever the assembly was, you know. So as importer of record, their business is being shut down. So when you're dealing with going through the products and whatever, not only do the product that you're going to sell either is approved by UL, either paid by yourself or your factory, but of course that factory also has to be accredited by UL because they have yearly inspections, UL, CSA, and so on. So I wanted to bring that up because it's something that, here's a buyer starting at Global Sources in April and then ran into problem. So goes back to what you're saying, it's inside.
Yeah, and work with the right suppliers and check them up. Yeah.
When you're picking the right CM, or when you're choosing the CM, sorry, and you go for factory visits, what do you look for? Obviously, I'm not like a factory auditor, and I'm a startup, so I don't have the money to hire a factory auditor. So if I go in myself, what are like the top 3 major things you would look for?
Okay. I would say first, pick an example, something they're making. Ask them what kind of specifications and documents do you have about that. Either something you made or the buyer made. And is it something that the people on the factory floor will understand? Is it with a lot of photos, is it in Chinese and so on, or is it something they will never even look at? So if they go in their office and they look for it for 10 minutes, you know it's just not going to be used. Okay? I would say look at the way, well, okay, let's say you buy an electronic product. Look at the way they check their components when they arrive. So pick one product and say, show me how you checked maybe the casing and how you checked the wires and how you check, you know, take a few components like this, a few critical components. How do you check it? Did you have some kind of report? Show me exactly, do it again, you know. where's the gauge, where's the instrument that you used, and you will see right away if they don't really know what they're doing, and they say, yeah, sure, we get this, and we see like this, and the spec is this, and it's fine, and we document it like this. Or if they scratch their heads and they talk around them for 5 minutes, they probably didn't really do that, okay? And then, well, again, let's go back to the documentation. What are people working on? Okay, do they have some kind of work instruction in front of them? And is it visual or is it just text? If it's just text, you can assume that they will never read it. And does it correspond to what they're doing, to what they're doing? And then, well, you don't speak Chinese, so it's a little bit limited, but maybe just get in a corner and look for a while, you know. Are the people just doing production, or from time to time, maybe every 5 pieces stop and they put it in some kind of fixture or whatever, they check, you know. Just a few examples like this. That's really a few examples of what an auditor would look at. It's not just do they have the documents, it's really is it effective and does it make sense? Does it address the main risks?
Hi. You talk a lot about the golden sample, and as a buyer based in Europe, do you suggest that we stay here until we get the perfect sample? Because what is the let's say the tolerance rate that we order a sample, it's for example not perfect, and they tell us yeah it will be perfect in the production. We say no, we want another one, and there's a point where everyone wants to start production because everyone has a timeline and the patience is not well on both sides. What is your recommendation there?
Well, try to understand why. I mean, if on this round of sampling they make one mistake, and then you say, oh, you need to get better, and then they do it again and they send to you, and you find another mistake that was fine on the previous one, and so on. Basically, these guys are totally unstructured. It should frighten you for production. Okay, if it's basically you need to understand. Okay, if it's due to, I don't know, maybe it's the outer casing, okay, in plastic, and you see some issues. Well, they need to change the mold, you know. But what they might do is say, well, wait, we'll just rework it by hand and whatnot, and then they send to you and still no good. Basically, do you want to go ahead and have all your mass production made with the wrong mold? You know, that's really up to you. You know, how much risk can you tolerate? If it's a small order, you can't push them too much. But if it's a $500,000 order, you know, you should push them and they should be motivated. If they're not motivated, you chose the wrong people. It goes back a lot to the same, to working with the right supplier. But you don't get into the trap of they make it and then they send to you and then you look at it and it's not good and then this, you know, it's like 2 weeks or 3 weeks rounds and it takes forever. Ask them to do it quick, send you some photos, some videos, this maybe on Skype, show you and okay, do this, is it fine, you know? But don't try to compress the timing. But I don't have like a very clear one-size-fits-all answer here.
So thank you, Renaud. Fantastic presentation.